Good morning, friends. If you want to find a seat, we'll get started in a couple minutes. Good morning again, and if you can find a seat, if you're planning to have one. Well, good morning, everyone. I'm amazed how many of you I saw yesterday at the Ordination and Consecration, and how many of you came back to church. That was incredible. I brownie points for all of you, and also I think a testament to the presence of the Holy Spirit with among us yesterday. So thank you for being here and for coming to church. And for those of you who weren't there yesterday, I hope you'll watch the recording and be caught up in the glory sometime this week if you haven't yet. It's my delight to continue some of that wave as we welcome our guest preacher and guest forum speaker, the Reverend Molly James. And I will say a few words of introduction about Molly, and then we'll get started in a conversation. And I'll say a little bit more about the format once I give some words of introduction. Molly currently serves as the Deputy Executive Officer of General Convention for the Episcopal Church. She holds a PhD in theology from the University of Exeter, UK, a Master's of Divinity from Yale Divinity School, and a Bachelor of Arts in Psychology from Tufts University. She grew up in Maine and was ordained as a priest in 2005. She has served on the bishop's staff in Maine and in Connecticut, and as a parish priest and hospital chaplain, as well as an adjunct professor focusing on ethics and pastoral care. Her doctoral research focused on suffering and grief, and her work with Joyful Acceptance, Baby, was published in 2013 by Whitford Stock. Molly previously served as co-chair of Young Clergy Women International, an ecumenical organization of clergy women under 40, of which I'm also a member, and as a board member of the Society of Scholar Priests. She has 2 children and loves cooking, reading, travel, and spending time in the splendor of God's creation. So please join me in welcoming Molly. It's a joy to be here. Yes. And we've spent the weekend together. We have. And it turns out we met 10 years ago, so it's really fun to be back with you. I also want to give a shout out. You want to just weave in Betsy Bell. Okay. So you all know Betsy Bell, so I don't think Betsy Bell needs an introduction to this community, but I have the glorious privilege of working with Betsy Bell now, and that's really just a wonderful thing, and I'm very grateful. Yes, and wonderful. As Betsy and I said to each other, Betsy's worlds of many types collided this weekend. It was fun to watch. So for the format of our time together, we have collected questions from you all, and some of these questions I've been copying throughout the transition process, most frequently asked questions I've received. And one of the reasons I'm sitting here right now, in addition to being one of your priests, is as chair of the Bishop Coadjutor Transition Committee, which is work that I've been doing with a great team for the past 13 months to oversee all of the elements of the transition of the Episcopal office. And despite what you might think, it's still not over. It will be finished in a few months. And I've done that work, like I said, with the transition committee, but also with the standing committee, of which our own Pam O'Halloran is the president and the one to blame for me being in this role. So. So I will ask questions, but please feel free to raise your hand, and if something strikes you in the midst, go ahead and raise your hand. We'll repeat questions so those on the live stream, welcome to you, can hear the questions asked. So we'll begin though just by starting with what happened yesterday, and really it's more than yesterday, it's over the past weekend and the past months. Yes. What your role, Molly, was with consecration yesterday, with consecrations all over the church.
So actually our role begins with at the election. So we're the General Convention office, which basically means we're the rules and order people of the Episcopal Church. We love the canons, we have started my own versions of them. So we are the people who make sure all of the processes and procedures and proper things are followed along the way, all the paperwork is complete and everything is valid as it should be according to our rules and order as an Episcopal Church. So that started with the election. If any of you here were voting delegates or involved in the election, you know that at the end of that election, there was a testimonial that had to be signed. That's our office, joining you in that process, and that certifies who was elected and that you are all in agreement that that's what's happened and that this person is worthy of being a bishop. Then those testimonials become a part of the consent process along with the evidence of ordination that was also read yesterday, and that comes from the order of ordinations, which is currently the church pension fund. So those pieces, and then you all heard those testimonials read yesterday, and so that's the first part of our role in the election and ordination process. And I think it may seem odd that so many things get read at the beginning of the service, but I think there's some really important things that happen in that. So Ann Dolly wasn't just ordained a bishop for Ohio, although I know you're really excited and glad to have her. She was ordained a bishop for the whole church. And no one gets to be a bishop in the church without the whole church, or at least a majority of the church, thinking it's a good idea. So part of that is not only saying, you all in Ohio follow the rules in electing her, she is a valid deacon and priest in the Episcopal Church, and the majority of the standing committees in the Episcopal Church and a majority of the bishops in the Episcopal Church all agree that it's a good idea for Ann Dolly to become the Bishop Coadjutor of Ohio. So we sort of bring all that rules and order check into the service, and I think it's a really important way to start the service, because it says this isn't just a liturgy for the people of Ohio. This is a liturgy for the whole church. We are creating a leader who will be a part of leadership, as she answered in her questions yesterday. She will be a part of leadership across the church and in the whole church. The other part that Betsy and I got to do yesterday morning, which is really fun actually, is make Ann Dolly's ordination certificate. So we print the text that says where she, the standard text that says, she was ordained to Bishop Coadjutor of Ohio on this day with these co-consecrating bishops. Those are the ones who are sitting in cooks and mitres and chairs. And then every bishop who's present signs that certificate. And they make a wax seal on the certificate. Which, I think way back in Roman charters in the Middle Ages, that's long been a tradition of how we make something official. We seal it. And they seal it with the seal of their diocese. For most bishops, that's their ring. So we have to remind them to take their ring off before they put it in the hot wax, because you don't want to do it with your hand. they need to be rented to lick it. And that sounds a little odd, but most of them, they're carved rings. And so if you lick it, and the wax doesn't get all down in the crevices of their ring. So it's helpful. But then they have to do it twice because we keep one for the archives and one goes, well, you can, if you ever go to the bishop's office, you can see it on the wall. So we have to run, especially on the second, and be careful because the ring's hot. You know, the second time. But the really cool thing about that is it's the seal of the diocese. And so it's the seal that you all have, that has belonged to that diocese since its founding. So it's also a wonderful connection to history. And sometimes that connection to history even happens in person. You all will appreciate knowing that Bishop Alan Yates yesterday used the seal, the same seal that had belonged to Barbara Harris. So there's often a continuity of, if they don't have a ring, it can be a stamp. That stamp especially, can get passed down from bishop to bishop over the years. So that's a really fun part, and it's a wonderful visual symbol of it. The whole church is here in a way, and this is really important. So that's another really fun piece that we get to.
Thank you so much.
May I ask one question?
Yes.
Are you serving at Bishop Curry's pleasure? And will you go back to being a parish priest?
Oh, that is an excellent question and a wonderful opportunity to offer a little education about the polity and structure of the church-wide staff. So, I don't serve at the pleasure of Bishop Curry, although if Bishop Curry didn't appreciate the work I did, I probably wouldn't have my job. So, in a sense I do, but structurally I actually report to the executive officer. I'm the deputy executive officer of General Convention, and I report to the executive officer, who's Canon Michael Barlow, and he was appointed into that role by the president of the House of Deputies, the presiding bishop, and in his case it was the previous president of the House of Deputies and the previous presiding bishop who appointed him into that role. He's been in that role for a decade. With the consent of executive council. So he has it matters what the presiding bishop thinks, and he is accountable in his role to the executive council. So that our office is as well. And I realized one more piece I should say about rules of order. The other thing you might have noticed me do yesterday was stand with Anne while she read the oath of conformity. Which we all sign as clergy in the course of our ordination. So she's already signed it twice, and she has to sign it again as a bishop. That's her statement that says, I will follow the doctrine and discipline and worship of the Episcopal Church. And that is signed by her, it is signed by the co-consecrating bishops, and then it is signed by me, and that is kept in the file in the archives. And I know from our colleagues in the archives that in other instances, this will not be applicable to Anna, I'm sure, but in other instances where bishops have had difficulties or perhaps, should we say, desire to take their diocese out of the Episcopal Church in some previous instances, the fact that they signed that document matters. So it is one more piece of the rules and order that we do.
Thank you, and thank you, Nancy, for modeling, but I hope you all will feel free to do all of
Yes,
this to ask questions as they come up. One question that you've mentioned a couple times, the co-consecrating bishops.
Yes.
Can you say how they were picked and why, maybe, if you can presume they were picked?
They are chosen, yes.
Yesterday, they had went into our room, get the picture taken. And there were two men had on blue hat. I thought we were in the wrong room or something. I didn't know what the situation is that our church has different people at the Zero Temple or something. I didn't know. But anyway, can't you explain that for me, please?
We had the question was about the one gentleman who was wearing the blue cap and then the difference between the people who are wearing the red cap. The gentleman explained to us that it's a particular order that is a dispersed order. He happened to be from Cuyahoga Falls, but it's a dispersed order, and that's just the color that's associated with that group.
Yes. Yeah. So I did notice you all had a number of folks, present who are members of religious orders, so they would wear a variety of things. Sometimes that can involve something on their head or a particular way they wear their robes. I believe your Roman Catholic bishop was there in the audience yesterday, so he was wearing a purple vestment with this white piece over it, and then a purple cap that goes back here that's known as a zucchetta. Some of our bishops, when they took off their miters, you might have seen, or as they were sitting around, some of our bishops also wear that. Bishops wear a purple one, but you will find priests who wear black ones occasionally. That's a piece of personal item. Yes.
I think there was a one-member discrepancy between the standing committees and the bishops who had given consent. Was that significant?
That's not significant, and it's rarely that close. So if you know the diocese, you know that we have more than 100 dioceses. So people often ask, wait a minute, what's the problem? I didn't. For mostly, I think, reasons of communication, timing, when standing committees meet, whether they have a full complement of people they meet, that we just never get 110 responses within the designated window. There only need to be 56, so 80 is awesome, and that's really high, and that's in fact, I think we have gotten better, must have gotten better at the communication, because in the course of, so I've been doing this job for 4 years, and in the course those numbers have gone up, so I think we're getting a better system. Advantage of COVID, people learn how to meet online, so more people can be present without having to be there in person, and we have ways for them to sign the consent process electronically. And trust me, if they have objections, we hear about it. So don't ever assume that because we get 110, that means anybody actually has a problem. Back to the question of the difference between co-consecrating bishops and the visiting bishops. So co-consecrating bishops are the bishops of record, and those are, and who obviously have to ask the questions and have a particular role in the service. You need 3 bishops, so presiding bishop is 1, usually there are 2 or more. Obviously, yesterday we had well over 3, so we were fine on that front. They are chosen by the bishop-elect with the approval of the presiding bishop. So that liturgy, it says in the canons, the presiding bishop takes order for the consecration. That liturgy belongs to the presiding bishop or someone he designates to be the presiding bishop at that liturgy. So nothing happens there in the liturgy that the presiding bishop didn't sign off on in terms of participants, etc. So those are the choice of the bishop-elect. And traditionally, as you said yesterday, right, those the retiring bishop is usually one of and in other cases it's like the bishop of the diocese that she came from. In her case, both Jeff and Paula were there, and Chelsea, who had recently served in Chicago with her. And then she invited Bishop Sparks to be there as well. And then the ELCA bishop was the one all the way left without the minor. The ELCA bishops don't usually wear minors. If you had a Moravian bishop, that's the other church we're in full communion with, you had a Moravian bishop here, they would have been included as well. So the co-consecrating bishops are usually a mix of bishops affiliated with the diocese that the person is coming into, as well as their sending diocese or bishops who have been a part of their journey.
Thank you.
Yes.
So this was probably the most commonly asked question that I got in my role in the transition was about what our slate looked like. So for those of you who might not have been fully paying attention to all of it, we had a slate of 3 candidates that the standing committee appointed a search committee who selected these candidates. And we happened to choose 3 women to be our slate, so we had no men on it. And I had a lot of very genuine and kindly phrased questions that alluded something to what about the men? And really about, and I, of course, I might have my own personal reactions to that question up front, but it is actually a totally fair and good question. And I wonder, and I'm sure you, well, for all the multiple reasons why this question might come your way, but I think there were also some genuine concerns raised about the state of sort of men and their health and their leadership in the church. And so what would you say if you were to get, when you get questions like that about women, and particularly as we're seeing more commonly sometimes these slates of all women bishops?
Yes. It just so happens that on Friday I was doing a presentation to with Matthew Price, who does all the data from the recorder ordination side of things. So our office collects the program report and all that, which is why I have all the congregational data, and he has all the clergy data, so we make a good team. And he was just talking about the fact that from 1989 to 2015, there was the number of bishops ordained equals the number of bishops ordained from 2016 to 2020, number of women bishops. So our first 25 years, we got a few. We got that many again in the last 5 years. And I would say, I'd have to sit with the list and you all don't need me to count. So, but there would even, that number's even higher in the last few, because look, we added another one yesterday. And so there are, and yet the House of Bishops is still not majority female. It's not even 50-50. So it is, and there are way more women ordained now than there were 10 years ago, 15 years ago. Like that, we're pretty close to 50-50 on the ordinations of women versus the ordinations of men. So statistically, actually, it's not uncommon that we would get some all women slates or some all male slates, as we had in Diocese of Virginia, right? And more often, probably we're going to get a mix of both, but there, because of the number of women who have been ordained in recent decades, there just are more women who have the experience and gifts and skills qualified to become a bishop. And on the other side of the argument, I would say, they're definitely still out there, and they're still qualified, and they're still becoming bishops, and they're still rising to places of senior leadership, and so they're very much still there. And in fact, drawing from Matthew's statistics again, to say men are still in the majority of rector positions in large parishes such as this one, so you all are special because you are not in the majority of parishes. Yes?
To piggyback onto that conversation, I know that I had sent in an email saying that for many of us, myself included, who were previously Catholic, and I was delighted to see that the Catholic bishop was invited. I'm wondering, can you expound on how that conversation went? I mean, even sitting there yesterday, I started thinking about, wow, this is unusual. I guess to pick a neutral word, maybe something more neutral, but how did that conversation come about? How was that met? Trying to figure out using other neutral words.
So, that invitation is always made at the diocese level in terms of inviting the local guests, whether they be other ecumenical or interfaith leaders. Oftentimes, we have folks from other faith traditions present at the consecration as well, and they're there as honored guests. As you will notice, right, that bishop did not process, that bishop did not participate in the ordination, that would be a violation of his rules. And ours, because he's not a bishop in our tradition. So the only bishops who can participate in the laying on of hands are our bishops in the Episcopal Church, or anyone in which any other bishops from the Anglican Communion or the ELCA or the Old Catholics from in Utrecht, which is complicated and not mostly located in the United States, so we don't need to.
Yeah, there was quite a process of determining those invitation lists. We also invited all of basically all of the major political leaders of Ohio. They all received a invitation in the mail with a letter. I think it was from Pam and me. We wrote it. That's what I remember. I don't know if we signed it. It explained what it was, because Justin Bibb probably doesn't know. I'm assuming he doesn't know as mayor of Cleveland the ins and outs of the Episcopal Church polity. So in our invitation, we included a letter of explanation. We didn't get a lot of political leaders there yesterday, but they're invited. And as Molly said, that interfaith and ecumenical meaning across Christian churches and denominations, they're all invited. Again, I think that is what Molly said, in recognition that ordination yesterday was not just for us, but for the whole church, and really also for the region and the state and how we are shaping it. A question.
There was another.
Oh, was there another?
You actually answered it in your.
Oh, okay.
Great.
So another question, which kind of continues about representation, of diversity or not on a slate. Our congregation has participated in sacred ground circles for the last several years.
Yes,
many of you in this room have done that. And some of us have also followed the news of the racial audit that the Episcopal Church completed a few years ago. So we know there's been a lot of momentum and work around reconciliation at the church-wide office level. And I'm wondering what you can speak to about sort of what you see as next on the horizon after the audit, after Sacred Ground. What do you see as the next frontier around racial reconciliation for the Episcopal Church?
Sure. So that is very much a priority of our presiding bishop, and it has been a priority continually affirmed by General Convention as well. So much so at the last General Convention that they authorized the creation of a group that will create another entity in good Episcopal fashion. We don't do anything too quickly. That group is going to create a sort of semi-autonomous entity that really is going to focus the work of the church on racial reconciliation and looking at our own particularly our own history as a church, and all of that. And that resolution actually invested a significant amount of the church's funding in an ongoing way for that work. So what our church said at General Convention last time was, we care about this work, and we're going to put significant money behind that, and we're going to set up a thing that says this work is ongoing. This isn't a task force that can exist between now and the next General Convention, which is in 2024. So it isn't something that's going to be done overnight. It is this ongoing work that is really an essential and important part of who we are as Christians, who we are as Episcopalians, and the work we have to do as church. So we're going to make sure that there's an entity that is funded that is going to do that for the long term. Thank you.
So we were really blessed to hear Bishop Curry, and to hear him preach yesterday, and for the clergy we gathered for lunch, 100 clergy of the diocese, which is basically all of us almost, gathered in the nave of Trinity Cathedral to hear him, and I think a lot of us are big fans, but we also know that his tenure is coming to an end. If you don't know that, by the way, it is. And so I'm wondering what you can say about how we, sort of the lay clergy of the church, might participate in that transition. I know some of that's already started, and when a new presiding bishop will be selected.
Sure. So yes, that position and transition has already started. As I said, we don't like to do anything quickly in the Episcopal Church, so we started that process in the summer of 2021, electing the members of the joint nominating committee for the election of a presiding bishop. We also like our long names. And that committee is made up of a few bishops and predominantly priests, deacons, and laymen from all across the church. So priests and lay people are already having a say in the process. That group will create a profile, which will come out actually in just a few weeks. So I'll plug here, if you're not already on the public affairs distribution list or emails from the Episcopal Church generally, I'm sure that your colleagues, your leaders here can help you get connected to that part on the Episcopal Church's website on the public affairs page. So then you can get notice of all kinds of church-wide things like that. So that profile will come out in a few weeks, and bishops who wish to be nominated will submit their materials by the middle of August. And there will be then, that will be vetted a slate, just like the diocesan process, a slate will be announced next spring. And there will be a forum at the convention in which people can ask questions of the candidates. And then ultimately the election happens in the House of Bishops. That is the electing body. The House of Deputies confirms the election, but the electorate is the House of Bishops. In fact, it used to be that there wasn't even an election while you were in the church. There was just the senior most bishop, senior as in longest serving, not necessarily age. Longest serving bishop was the one who presided, hence the term presiding bishop, who presided at House of Bishops meetings. And they were still a bishop of the diocese, and they just were simply the person who presided at meetings. Then eventually they decided, well, they made it a little more fair and they elect someone to that role, so it wasn't necessarily just always the last thing someone did as a bishop, right? They could do it earlier in their tenure as a bishop. But they still kept their diocese until the mid-20th century, when it became a full-time job and the bishop had to leave their diocese to serve as the staff bishop. Yes.
In practical terms, and in a very genteel Episcopal way, what kind of campaigning goes on by bishops for TV role?
That's a great question.
That's the only line item.
You might want to ask that. Much of the discussion of that happens when the House of Bishops meets, and we are not part of that because we are not bishops. So you might want to ask your bishop.
What have you heard?
About that. I would generally say to you that the ones who are visibly campaigning are less likely to be elected as the presiding bishop. The thing about this, and the particularity about this, that's maybe different than the other offices, the House of Bishops is really a community. They meet multiple times a year. They are colleagues together. There's a bit over 100 of them serving, obviously, 100 plus dioceses, as active bishops, and then their assistant bishops, etc. So they know each other. So that decision next summer isn't just based on a few forums, as we have to make a decision when we elect a bishop in the diocese, on a video and some questions. In most cases, they've known each other for years, if not decades. So it's a different thing. So there isn't so much a need for campaigning, because they've been building relationships with each other for years.
Thank you.
I see I just one question that was asked me yesterday, which just relates. Why does the presiding bishop's office have a tenure and diocesan bishops can serve as long as they want? In fact, the tenure used to be even longer. It used to be 12 years. Basically, the sort of short and honest answer is it's a really hard job and it's exhausting. So we would risk the health of our beloved bishops if we kept them in that office much longer. It's a bit like being the president. And also it's an opportunity to be, to ensure a change in leadership. If the person is young enough when they are elected the first time, someone theoretically could serve 2 terms. I'm not sure anybody wants to do 18 years. That would be a really long time and that would be really hard. Theoretically, that is possible.
Would retired bishops be eligible?
Not if they are fully retired, and certainly not if they're over the age of 72. So the age of 72 is the retirement age in the Episcopal Church. All of us clergy have to give up our jurisdiction, our authority, our current role as a clergy person. We can still be a clergy person, we just can't serve in the same place where we're currently serving. And if you serve like as a priest, after 72, you have to renew that contract every year with the bishop. Yes, a bishop, so obviously the retirement age being 72, so, someone who is 63 into 2024, technically they could be elected. Technically, someone who's even older than that could be elected as the bishop, but they couldn't serve a full term. And I think that's probably not likely to happen. I'm also guessing that, if you're just ready to retire, you're not going to want to be the retired bishop because you're going to work a job and a half or 2 jobs, really, in terms of time and commitment. It takes a lot out of you to do that work, and it's wonderful, and it is, it's a tremendous. We have been blessed by Michael Curry, and he has given a tremendous amount of himself to the church in wonderful ways, and that's probably not sustainable beyond the 9-year period.
Where does Michael Curry go?
He doesn't have to. I mean, he can still function as a bishop. He can still do things. Catherine Dever Story does. She's currently serving as an assistant bishop in the Diocese of Los Angeles, so she's very much still around. So I would be anticipating. That's really a question for Michael Curry. He would be well deserved to take some time off and be a rest for a while. And my guess is he will very much still be out there in the world, preaching and sharing the news with people everywhere. Yes?
Following up on both of those questions, but Michael Curry has been such a public figure.
Absolutely.
Not only within the Episcopal Church, but well beyond it. This little family wedding he attended.
Right.
That he referred to yesterday, and in his appearance on national television and so forth. Is there a sense that some people might be reluctant in terms of the hard act to follow? I'm not sure I want to follow Michael Curry. Is that going to be a tough issue as far as getting some otherwise very competent candidates?
It could be, certainly. I do think because Michael Curry has been such a public figure and probably isn't going to just disappear and fade away and not be publicly visible anymore. In some ways, it may be that he continues to in that way as a public, and that the next presiding bishop is perhaps a bit more internally focused in terms of the structures and governance of the church and things. Because my other area is the statistics and the program work. We are doing really fabulously as a church in terms of our finances, remarkably so. And most of our churches are tiny and small, like 2/3 of them have an ASA, an average Sunday attendance under 50. So the structure, we are in a place of needing some reimagining of our structures and how we do things. The structure of our church governance at the church-wide level was really designed for the church of the 1950s and 60s, and we aren't the church of the 1950s and 60s anymore. That was an aberration of the birth rate in the United States. So that's not a sustainable. Much of the way we do our structures and our governance and our expectation of one priest, one parish, or in your case, 3 or 4 priests, one parish. You all are blessed in that way. Lots of congregations are not. They can maybe have a quarter time, half-time priest. So there's a lot of reimagining and restructuring that will need to happen. And so I think much the way a rector transition happens and the next rector you get is very different than the one you had before because you're all in different places of congregation and what you need is different. Michael Curry has been a huge blessing to the Episcopal Church. I hope he's not going it. I hope he will stay around and be a public face for us. And I think our next presiding bishop will bring a very different set of gifts that are needed in this Yes,
This is a question for both of you. Bringing it back to your diocese.
yes.
We're still in transition. What does this transition during the coadjutor period look like? And what's the role of the Office of General Convention in that event?
I'll start. So thank you, David. So what's David's asking that now we're really officially in a bishop coadjutor time. And I'll say it's up to Bishop, well, basically all of it is up to Bishop Mark Hollingsworth, but also he was the one that made the decision to do the bishop coadjutor model, which is where it's outgoing and incoming bishop share the office for a time. The idea is, I think, to really ease the transition for everyone and to pass institutional knowledge and pastoral knowledge amongst each other. Some bishops, you end and the other one begins, and that's again up to the sitting diocesan bishop. So that is all still somewhat to be revealed. Bishop Mark, and now we can say Bishop Ann, wow, that feels great. They work out amongst the two of them how they will divide their labors for this time, again, really with that goal of sharing the work and passing on the knowledge. And then Bishop Mark has said that he will retire officially before our next diocesan convention, which is in this fall. And then he is still, and Sue, they're still, I think, figuring out some of their own life decisions about what will happen next and what their roles will be here. But they will be figuring that out and announcing it as they've sort of kept us in the loop about what they'll do. And then Anne will take over as Bishop Diocesan, then at the latest by the convention. Bill, is there anything as our Chancellor and candidate to the Ordinary to add that you would add?
You covered it just fine. Thank you.
Yes.
And I think the piece to note is, so Bishop Ann won't have jurisdiction until that point. When that point is, and somebody tells us, we'll send her another certificate. It's not as big and not as pretty as the one from yesterday. And we'll send her another certificate noting her change of status to Bishop Diocesan. And so for the time until Mark retires and turns the authority over, she doesn't adjudicate Title IV matters, she doesn't consent to bishop elections, she doesn't have that sort of legal authority within the church until Mark goes. And I see these questions, which I love, that we have to wrap up because Molly has to preach for a third time. But I just will want to ask one last question because I want to end at a particular spot. Yes, so you do a tremendous amount of travel. Thank you. On behalf of all of us, thank you for your work. Molly and Betsy are heading to Pittsburgh to go continue their work at that level of the church. I'm wondering though, as you travel and see so many consecrations and so many dioceses, what is giving you hope about the church today and as we look to the future? Sure. Well, being a part of events like yesterday, I mean, how do you not feel the joy and hope and enthusiasm after being able to be a part of a celebration like that, and a sense of sort of new beginnings and new possibilities, as well as tremendous gratitude for all the leadership that has brought you here. I thought it was such a lovely image yesterday when the other bishops of Ohio shared in passing giving the pastoral staff to Anne. So that I love how many young people I see in church on Sunday morning here were present yesterday at the consecration. How many younger people are passionate about serving in our bodies, the various task forces and boards and commissions and things that meet between general conventions. There's a caucus of under 40 deputies, and deputies who are under the age of 40. And that didn't exist when I was a deputy under 40. And so I'm really excited to see that. I'm excited to see how many younger generations. I will also say, I have the great gift of serving at this level of leadership. I still qualify as under 45. And I'm one of the few people under 45 at this level of leadership. And I will say, in gratitude to your diocese, that I'm here because Gabe Jennings invited me into opportunities for leadership at a young age as a deputy, and to serve on our own bodies and to participate in things. And I have been very blessed to have her and others as a mentor who have helped me to grow as a leader. And I see that same piece happening, that generational transition happening across the church, where people with lots of wisdom and experience are empowering and supporting the next generation of leaders stepping in. So that very much gives me hope to see that generations working together for the good of the church.
Thank you so much, and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.
And one note for next week's forum, so you can plan to attend, the very Reverend Tracy Lind, continuing to build on the wisdom of our leaders who have come before us in these positions. She's a former dean at Trinity Cathedral, for those of you who don't know her, and she is retired now, and one of her gifts is as a photographer, and she has an art installation in our current gallery show, and she'll be in the dining room, so just below us, next Sunday, to speak about her piece, Altar of Intersection. So I really hope you will join us for that, and welcome Tracy here to speak about altars of the world and art and where her ministry is now. So that's next Sunday, May 7th, 10:15 in the dining room. So please join us. Thanks.